Today, we dive into the one timepiece that has earned the unwavering respect of true collectors, the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711, a watch whose quiet power, heritage, and design mastery have made it a modern legend. To understand why the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 commands such profound respect among serious collectors, we must begin in the 1970s, an era defined by economic turbulence, the quartz crisis, and a radical rethinking of what luxury could represent. Because the Nautilus was not born into comfort, but into disruption. Introduced in 1976 by Patek Philippe as a daring proposition, a high-end sports watch crafted in stainless steel, priced comparably to precious metal dress pieces, and designed by the visionary Gerald Genta, whose philosophy rejected ornamentation in favor of architectural clarity and functional elegance. The porthole-inspired case, with its integrated bracelet and softly contoured octagonal bezel, broke decisively from conservative round gold watches that had long defined traditional refinement, and instead presented a new language of understated confidence, where brushed surfaces played against polished chamfers and where proportions were calculated with mathematical precision. Collectors respect the 5711 not because it is difficult to obtain, but because it represents the maturation of an idea first embodied in the original reference 3700. An idea that steel could be noble, that sport could coexist with sophistication, and that simplicity could require immense technical discipline. And when you hold the 5711 in your hand, you feel that discipline in the slim automatic caliber 324SC, in the balanced dial with its horizontal embossing, in the restrained date aperture at 3 o'clock, and in the seamless articulation of the bracelet that drapes like tailored fabric around the wrist. Nothing about the watch is accidental, nothing feels excessive, and nothing attempts to overwhelm, which is precisely why seasoned enthusiasts view it as a benchmark of taste rather than a symbol of excess, a timepiece that rewards understanding rather than impulse, and a modern classic whose authority is rooted not in noise, but in nuance. What elevates the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 from admired object to respected icon is not merely its origin story, but the extraordinary discipline embedded in its design language, a discipline that reveals itself slowly and rewards prolonged study. At first glance, the watch appears disarmingly simple, almost minimal, yet the longer one examines it, the more one recognizes the architectural intelligence behind every contour, every transition, every surface treatment. Because the case is not simply shaped, it is sculpted, with alternating brushed and polished finishes that catch light differently depending on angle, creating a dynamic presence without resorting to ornamentation. The bezel's rounded octagon is neither aggressive nor delicate, but poised, framing a dial whose horizontal grooves generate depth without clutter, and whose color, particularly in the blue variants, shifts subtly from slate to indigo, depending on ambient illumination, offering visual complexity without visual noise. Collectors respect this restraint because restraint is difficult, because achieving harmony between sportiness and elegance requires relentless refinement, and because the integrated bracelet, often imitated yet rarely equaled, flows from the case with uninterrupted continuity, tapering gracefully while maintaining structural robustness, each link articulated with such precision that the watch feels less like an accessory and more like an extension of the wearer. Even the proportions, 40 millimeters in diameter, yet slim on the wrist, demonstrate a sensitivity to balance that many contemporary pieces ignore in pursuit of scale. And inside, the automatic caliber beats with quiet reliability, finished with Geneva stripes, beveled edges, and a rotor adorned with the Calatrava cross, visible through the sapphire caseback as a reminder that true luxury resides beneath the surface. This synthesis of engineering, aesthetics, and tactile refinement is why seasoned enthusiasts speak of the 5711 with reverence, because it represents coherence, a complete vision executed without compromise, a watch that does not chase trends, but defines a standard. And in a market saturated with spectacle, that coherence is what earns enduring respect. Beyond aesthetics and mechanical refinement, what truly solidifies the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 as the watch real collectors respect is its cultural gravitas, the way it transcends mere product status and becomes a reference point in modern horology. because respect in collecting circles is inseparable from influence, and the 5711 has influenced not only design language across the industry, but also the psychology of contemporary collecting. When Patek Philippe announced the discontinuation of the 5711 in 2021, the reaction was not simply commercial frenzy, but a collective recognition that a chapter in watchmaking history had closed, and that scarcity was now intertwined with legacy. Yet seasoned enthusiasts understood that the watch's authority had been established long before auction results surged or waiting lists extended indefinitely. Its influence can be traced in the resurgence of integrated bracelet sports watches from historic maisons and emerging independents alike, each attempting to capture the equilibrium between versatility and refinement that the Nautilus perfected. But imitation only underscores the original's impact, because cultural weight cannot be reverse engineered. Collectors respect the 5711 because it marks a moment when tradition adapted without surrendering identity, when a conservative manufacturer embraced modernity without abandoning craftsmanship, and when steel became a canvas for high horology rather than a compromised material. It has appeared on wrists across industries, from finance to art to technology, not as a flamboyant declaration, but as a subtle signal of discernment. And in private gatherings of enthusiasts, the conversation around a 5711 is rarely about price and almost always about proportion, lineage, and execution. Because true respect is measured not by headlines, but by how a piece holds its relevance over decades. The 5711 has navigated shifting tastes, economic cycles, and evolving aesthetics without losing coherence. And that durability of identity is precisely what transforms it from a desirable object into a cultural touchstone within the collecting community. Another dimension that compels seasoned enthusiasts to revere the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 is the philosophy it embodies regarding ownership, longevity, and generational continuity. Because within the universe of high horology, respect is inseparable from the idea that a watch should outlive its first custodian and carry meaning across decades. This principle has long been articulated by Patek Philippe through its emphasis on stewardship rather than possession. And the 5711 captures that ethos in a form that is both contemporary and timeless, offering water resistance sufficient for daily wear, robustness adequate for active lifestyles, and refinement suitable for formal settings, thereby dissolving the artificial boundary between tool and treasure. Collectors value this versatility because it aligns with authenticity. A watch that can genuinely accompany its owner through varied contexts acquires narrative depth, subtle marks of wear become chapters rather than flaws, and the brushed surfaces of the case evolve gracefully rather than deteriorate. The slim automatic movement inside is not constructed for spectacle, but for endurance, regulated to dependable standards, decorated with restraint, and designed to be serviced for generations, reinforcing the notion that true luxury is measured in decades rather than seasons. Moreover, the balanced dial configuration, free from unnecessary complications, ensures legibility and clarity, qualities that age more gracefully than novelty features. And this refusal to chase technical theatrics is precisely what seasoned collectors admire, because it signals confidence in proportion and permanence. In an environment saturated with limited editions engineered to provoke urgency, the 5711 stands as an affirmation that lasting value arises from cohesion, heritage, and disciplined execution. And that is why, when experienced collectors discuss watches worthy of respect, they often return not to the loudest innovation or the rarest alloy, but to this harmonious synthesis of durability, elegance, and intergenerational significance. There is also a psychological dimension that explains why the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 earns authentic reverence rather than fleeting admiration. And that dimension lies in the distinction between desire and discernment. Because many watches are desired, but very few withstand scrutiny from individuals who have handled hundreds, sometimes thousands of timepieces across eras and price segments. Seasoned collectors develop an internal calibration system, an instinct refined through exposure to vintage references, independent ateliers, grand complications, and obscure historical models. And when such individuals evaluate the 5711, they recognize coherence instead of compromise. They perceive intentionality instead of opportunism. The case thickness aligns proportionally with the bezel diameter. The The bracelet taper harmonizes with the clasp architecture. The dial furniture maintains equilibrium between applied indices and negative space. And even the seconds hand counterbalance is designed with subtlety rather than exaggeration, demonstrating that nothing has been left unresolved. This holistic integrity is rare, because in many modern releases, one can identify a single element that feels forced, an oversized logo, an unnecessary color accent, an inflated dimension designed to capture attention. But with the 5711, the absence of such dissonance is precisely what commands esteem. Furthermore, collectors understand the discipline required to preserve continuity within a lineage, and the 5711 represents a careful evolution rather than a radical reinvention, maintaining fidelity to its ancestral blueprint while refining movement architecture, bracelet construction, and finishing standards. A balance that demands humility from a manufacturer confident enough not to overcorrect. Respect in this context is not emotional enthusiasm, but intellectual acknowledgement, an appreciation for restraint in an industry often tempted by spectacle. And when experienced enthusiasts encounter the 5711, they are not impressed in the superficial sense. They are convinced. And conviction, far more than excitement, is what defines enduring regard in the realm of serious collecting. Equally important to understanding why the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 is revered is its role as a benchmark in the broader evolution of contemporary luxury sports watches. Because respect among collectors often arises from context, comparison, and influence, and the 5711 has repeatedly proven itself as a reference point against which others are measured. When new integrated bracelet sports models emerge from historic maisons or independent brands, their designs are inevitably scrutinized in relation to the Nautilus, not merely for aesthetic similarity, but for the subtle balance of proportions, finishing quality, and mechanical integrity it established. And this positions the 5711 not only as an object of desire, but as a silent curriculum for aspiring connoisseurs. Beyond design, it sets standards for consistency in production, demonstrating that a steel sports watch could be simultaneously robust, versatile, and luxurious without resorting to gimmicks, and that such harmony could be maintained across decades without eroding identity. Collectors respect the 5711 because it teaches patience, observation, and discernment, qualities that extend beyond the watch itself into the way enthusiasts approach acquisitions, assess condition, and evaluate provenance. Even in auction rooms or secondary markets, where scarcity drives attention, seasoned collectors often reference it less for market value and more for its exemplary cohesion, its embodiment of a philosophy that prioritizes substance over spectacle, and its quiet authority that transcends trends. Reminding the horological community that the most powerful statements are rarely loud, that influence is measured not in press releases, but in the quiet replication of principles, and that a watch can earn enduring respect not because it shouts, but because it consistently demonstrates excellence, integrity, and a refined understanding of proportion, finishing, and functional elegance. Finally, the lasting reverence for the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 emerges from the intimate, almost personal experience it provides to its owner, because true collectors respect watches that engage the senses, invite contemplation, and reward repeated interaction over time. Every glance at the horizontally embossed dial reveals subtle shifts in light and texture. Every gentle click of the clasp conveys mechanical precision, and the tactile articulation of the bracelet creates a connection between human and machine that feels deliberate rather than incidental. This sensory dialogue reinforces the perception that the 5711 is not merely a tool or a status symbol, but a crafted companion, one whose design encourages reflection on proportion, heritage, and purpose, fostering a deeper appreciation for what horology can achieve when intention, craftsmanship, and aesthetics align. Moreover, the watch instills a sense of responsibility, reminding collectors that objects of such refinement require care, maintenance, and respect for history. And in that practice of stewardship, the collector internalizes the very principles that the watch embodies: patience, discernment, and fidelity to tradition. It is this combination of tactile engagement, intellectual satisfaction, and moral reinforcement that distinguishes the 5711 from fleeting trends or purely decorative pieces, elevating it to a symbol of cultivated taste and enduring judgment. In the end, the Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 commands respect, not because it is rare or expensive, but because it encapsulates a holistic philosophy of watchmaking, one in which every element serves a purpose, every proportion communicates intention, and every interaction deepens the bond between the observer and the object, making it unequivocally the watch that real collectors admire above all. The Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 proves that lasting value comes from mastery, balance, and thoughtful design. If you want to explore more watches that define true collecting, dive into my channel and discover the stories behind horology's most respected icons.